The Ascension Gala blazed with 10,000 candles, their flames reflected in the gilded mirrors that lined the great hall of Thornspire Castle. Serelith pressed her back against the cold marble pillar, hidden among the trailing silk banners of House Valanthos, her pulse drumming so violently she feared the wolves nearby might hear it. Her hand drifted to her collarbone, where a strange mark had burned beneath her skin for 3 weeks now. Hidden beneath the high neckline of her dress, it pulsed with warmth whenever she thought of that night. The Moonfire Rite. She should not have come tonight. Every instinct had screamed at her to stay in her small chamber in the servants' wing, to avoid the spectacle unfolding below. But Prince Ivaran had sent her a note that morning, pressed into her palm by a trusted messenger. Tonight, everything changes. Watch for me. So she had come. She had dressed in her finest gown, the deep blue one that had been her mother's. She had pinned her dark hair away from her face and climbed to this hidden alcove where she could see without being seen. Below her, the nobility of Valanthos swirled in their finery, alpha lords in ceremonial black, ladies draped in moon silver and pearl, and at the center of it all, seated upon the obsidian throne, the Alpha King himself. Kedron. Even his name sent a shiver down her spine, though she could not say why. The king was not supposed to matter to her. He was cold, distant, a figure of legend rather than flesh. He had ruled Valanthos for 5 years since his father's death, and in all that time, Serelith had seen him perhaps a dozen times from afar. It was his younger brother who had captured her heart. Ivaran stood at the base of the throne's dais, resplendent in silver and white. His golden hair caught the candlelight like a crown of its own. His smile, when he turned it upon the crowd, was warm and inviting. That smile had been her undoing. She remembered the Moonfire Rite with painful clarity. The lunar eclipse had painted the sky in shades of blood and shadow. The ancient tradition demanded that unmated wolves gather in the sacred grove, masked and cloaked, to let fate guide them toward their destined partners. Serelith had not intended to participate. She was nobody, a seamstress's daughter with a minor gift for reading emotions, nothing that would interest the high-born wolves who prowled the grove, seeking advantageous matches. But someone had found her. A figure in a wolf mask had emerged from the darkness, tall and broad-shouldered. He had taken her hand without speaking, led her deeper into the grove where the moonfire flowers bloomed silver white. And when he had lifted his mask just enough to press his lips to hers, Serelith's entire world had ignited. The kiss had lasted only moments, but in those moments, she had felt something ancient awaken in her blood. A bond, a claiming, a recognition so profound it had stolen her breath. When she had opened her eyes, the figure was retreating into the shadows. The moonfire flowers had cast their strange silver glow across everything, washing colors pale and deceptive. In that ethereal light, she could have sworn she glimpsed golden hair beneath the mask. Ivaran. It had to be Ivaran. He had been watching her for weeks before the rite, leaving small gifts outside her door, smiling at her across crowded rooms. He had once told her, in a whispered conversation that made her blush to remember, that he sensed something special in her, something that drew him like a moth to flame. The soul mark had appeared on her collarbone the next morning, a delicate pattern of intertwined crescents that glowed faintly when she touched it. And 1 week ago, she had discovered she was carrying his child. Lords and ladies of Valanthos, the high priestess announced, her voice cutting through Serelith's memories. We gather tonight not only to celebrate the prosperity of our realm, but to honor the sacred bonds that strengthen our bloodlines. Serelith's heart seized. As is tradition following a moonfire rite, I call upon any who completed the sacred bond to step forward and be recognized. The crowd murmured with anticipation. This was the moment noble houses revealed strategic matches made under the eclipse's blessing. Political alliances sealed with the legitimacy of fate. Serelith watched Ivaran's face, searching for some sign. His note had promised that everything would change tonight. Would he truly claim her publicly? Would he risk the scandal of announcing a bond with a commoner? Ivaran stepped forward. Serelith's breath caught. Her mark flared with sudden heat. High Priestess, Ivaran began, his voice carrying across the silent hall. I must confess that during the Moonfire rite That is not your confession to make, brother. The voice came from the throne. Every head in the great hall turned as King Kadrin rose to his feet. He moved down the dais steps with the lethal grace of a predator, his dark hair falling across eyes that blazed with barely contained fury. Serelith's soul mark erupted with fire. She gasped, clapping her hand over the burning mark as pain radiated through her chest. This was wrong. The mark had never hurt like this before. It had only ever warmed gently when she thought of that night, of the kiss, of Ivaran. But Ivaran was not moving toward her. Kadrin was. I am the one who completed the sacred bond during the Moonfire rite, the Alpha King declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. The woman I kissed that night bears my mark, and I will not stand silent while another attempts to claim what is mine. The hall exploded into chaos. Serelith could not breathe, could not think, could not understand what was happening. Kadrin, the king. He was claiming the kiss that she had been certain belonged to Ivaran. Her mark burned hotter, pulsing in rhythm with footsteps she could not see but somehow felt. He was coming toward her, through the crowd, through the confusion, following something invisible that connected them. And in that moment of horrible clarity, Serelith understood. The mark was not responding to her memories of that night. It was responding to him. She turned and ran. The servants' passages of Thornspire had been Serelith's sanctuary for 3 years. She knew every twist and turn, every loose stone and creaking board. She flew through them now with the desperation of a hunted animal, her hand still pressed to the mark that would not stop burning. Behind her, somewhere in the chaos of the great hall, she heard a howl of frustration that shook dust from the ancient rafters. He was following. How? How could he possibly know where she had gone? The passages were secret, known only to the servants who used them daily. No king had ever set foot in these cramped corridors. But the bond knew. Serelith could feel it now, a tether she had never noticed before, pulling taut between her chest and something massive and furious that drew closer with every heartbeat. She burst from the passages into the moonlit courtyard and did not stop running. The winter air bit at her exposed skin as she fled through the castle gates. Guards shouted after her, but she was already gone, swallowed by the forest that bordered the capital city. She ran until her lungs screamed for mercy, until her legs buckled beneath her, until she collapsed against an ancient oak and sobbed into her trembling hands. Everything she had believed was a lie. The kiss, the bond, the father of the child growing inside her. If Kadrin was telling the truth, if he was truly the one who had kissed her that night, then nothing made sense. Why would the Alpha King seek out a nobody seamstress during the Moonfire rite? Why would he kiss her and then vanish without a word? Why would he let 3 weeks pass in silence while she believed herself bound to his brother? Unless Kadrin was lying. But the mark. The burning, pulsing, undeniable mark that had flared to life the moment he spoke. That had screamed with recognition when he claimed her. Marks did not lie. Serelith pressed her palm flat against her collarbone, feeling the heat radiate through her skin. The crescents seemed to writhe beneath her touch, as if trying to pull her back toward the castle. Back toward him. No, she whispered. I will not be anyone's pawn. She did not understand what game was being played, but she understood enough to know she wanted no part of it. A commoner caught between 2 princes of the blood would be crushed without thought. And her child. The child would be destroyed. 7 weeks later, the village of Willowmere welcomed a quiet young widow with gentle hands and sad eyes. Serelith had traveled east for 3 weeks, then south for 2 more, crossing into the wild territories that paid only nominal allegiance to the throne of Valanthos. She had traded her fine dress for peasant wool. She had cut her dark hair to her shoulders and learned to answer to Sarah, a name common enough to draw no attention. The village healer had died the previous winter, leaving Willowmere without anyone to tend their sick and injured. When Sarilith demonstrated her ability to ease pain and speed healing, minor gifts she had always hidden for fear of drawing unwanted attention, the elders had offered her the empty cottage at the edge of the mill pond. She had accepted without hesitation. Now spring was breaking through the last frost, and Sarilith spent her days gathering herbs and mixing poultices. Her belly had begun to swell noticeably, and the village women clucked sympathetically over the young widow carrying her dead husband's child. If they only knew. The mark on her collarbone had never faded. Every night, Sarilith examined it by candlelight, watching the twin crescents pulse with warmth that should have disappeared weeks ago. Among wolf-kind, a rejected bond dissolved quickly. The mark should have withered and vanished within days of her flight from Thornspire. Instead, it had grown stronger. The crescents were darker now, more defined, as if being etched deeper into her skin with each passing day. And sometimes, late at night when the village slept and silence pressed against her windows, Sarilith felt something through the mark. A presence, vast and restless, searching, hunting. She told herself it was imagination, told herself that distance and time would eventually sever whatever connection the Moonfire Rite had forged. Told herself that King Kadrin had certainly forgotten about the commoner girl who had fled his declaration. But then the merchants came. Sarilith was grinding feverfew in her small kitchen when Iona, the miller's wife, burst through her door with wild eyes. "Sarah, you must hear this. Traders have arrived from the capital." "I have no need for capital gossip," Sarilith said carefully. "This is not gossip." Iona grabbed her hands, crushing feverfew between their palms. "The Alpha King has gone mad." The pestle slipped from Sarilith's frozen fingers. "What?" "He has torn the kingdom apart hunting for a woman. No one knows who she is or what she did. Only that every wolf in Valanthos has been commanded to search. Villages have been raided. Noble houses have been threatened." Iona's voice dropped to a whisper. "They say he has not slept since the Ascension Gala. They say his wolf has nearly consumed him." Sarilith's hand moved to her belly, where the child stirred as if recognizing the words. "And his brother?" she heard herself ask. "Prince Ivaran?" Iona's face darkened. "Imprisoned. The king accused him of some terrible deception, though no one knows the details. House Merenth has withdrawn to their northern stronghold, and their daughter Selvira, the one everyone expected Prince Ivaran to wed, has been declared an enemy of the crown. Imprisoned. Ivaran imprisoned." The world tilted beneath Sarilith's feet. What had happened after she fled? The mark on her collarbone flared with sudden searing heat, and Sarilith gasped as a sensation crashed through her that she had never felt before. He was close. Sarilith stood at her window, watching the tree line as the sun bled toward the horizon. 3 shadows moved between the ancient oaks, large, four-legged, deliberate, wolves. She had known this moment would come. Some part of her had always known that distance and disguise would not be enough, that the bond she had tried so desperately to deny would eventually drag her back into the chaos she had fled. But knowing did not make it any less terrifying. The mark burned steadily now, a constant fire beneath her skin. Through it, she could feel him drawing closer. Not just his wolves. Him. A knock at her door made her jump. Sarilith grabbed the iron poker from beside her hearth, the only weapon she possessed, and approached slowly. "Who is there?" "Someone who means you no harm, my lady." The voice was male, deep, and weathered. "I am Tavish, first shield to the Alpha King. I have come alone to speak with you." Alone? Sarilith almost laughed. She had seen at least 3 wolves in the forest, and she doubted they were the only ones. "If you come from the king, then we have nothing to discuss." "Please." The voice softened. "I bring news that you must hear. About the Moonfire Rite. About Prince Ivaran. About everything you believe happened that night." Sarilith's grip tightened on the poker. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. The man on her threshold was perhaps 50, his dark hair silver at the temples, his face carved by decades of battle and service. But his eyes, a deep amber that marked him as highborn wolf, held something unexpected. Compassion. "May I enter?" Tavish asked. Sarilith stepped aside. The first shield moved into her modest cottage, taking in the drying herbs, the simple furniture, the narrow bed where she had spent countless nights crying into her pillow. If he was surprised that the woman his king had torn apart a kingdom to find was living in such humble circumstances, he did not show it. "You ran before the truth could reach you," Tavish said quietly. "What you saw in the Great Hall that night, what you believed, it was not reality." "I know what I saw." Sarilith kept the poker raised between them. "I know what I felt." "You felt the bond responding to its true source." Tavish turned to face her, his expression grave. "My lady, Prince Ivaran did not kiss you during the Moonfire rite. He was never in the sacred grove that night. He orchestrated an elaborate deception to make you believe something that never happened." The words struck her like physical blows. "That is impossible. I saw golden hair beneath the mask. I knew." "You saw what the Moonfire flowers wanted you to see." Tavish's voice was gentle but firm. "The blooms cast a silver-white light that distorts true colors. Dark hair appears pale, brown eyes seem amber. It is why the rite has always been conducted among those flowers, to strip away surface appearances and let the bond guide true mates together." He paused. "King Kadrin has dark hair, my lady. In the glow of the Moonfire flowers, it would have appeared much lighter than it truly is." Sarilith's legs threatened to buckle. "King Kadrin was the one who found you in the grove that night. He had been watching you for months, drawn by the same force that draws all true mates together, though he fought against it. A king cannot simply claim a commoner, not without political consequences. So he intended to let the bond reveal itself naturally, to court you properly after the rite confirmed what he already knew." "Then why did he not speak to me? Why did he vanish after the kiss?" Pain flickered across Tavish's face. "Because Ivaran drugged him." The moment the king left the grove, his brother's allies were waiting. They dosed him with nightbloom extract, a compound that clouds memory and steals hours from the mind. By the time Kadrin woke, dawn had broken and you had already been approached by Ivaran, who convinced you that he was the one who kissed you. Sarilith sank into her chair, the poker clattering to the floor. All those weeks, all those sweet words and secret smiles from Ivaran. All those moments when she had believed a prince loved her. Lies. Every single one. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would Ivaran do this?" "Because House Moranth promised him the throne if he could secure the bond of his brother's true mate." Tavish's voice hardened. "They intended to use you as leverage, to force Kadrin into impossible choices, and when you fled before their plan could unfold, everything collapsed." Sarilith's hand moved to her belly. "The child," she breathed. "Whose child am I carrying?" Tavish met her eyes with absolute certainty. "The king's. Only a true mate bond sealed by the Moonfire rite can result in conception. Ivaran never touched you in any way that matters." The room spun around her. Kadrin's child. She was carrying Kadrin's child, and she had been running from him for 7 weeks while he tore his kingdom apart to find her. Before Sarilith could speak, Tavish's head snapped toward the window. His nostrils flared, scenting something on the wind. "We are not alone," he said sharply. Through the glass, Sarilith saw new shapes emerging from the forest, not the silver-gray wolves who had watched her cottage earlier. These were darker, larger, moving with coordinated precision, and they were not alone. A figure stepped from the shadows, draped in the black and crimson of House Moranth, a crossbow raised and aimed directly at Sarilith's window. "They found you," Tavish growled, reaching for his blade. "The Moranth assassins. They found you first." The window exploded inward as the first bolt flew. Glass shards exploded across Sarilith's cottage as the crossbow bolt buried itself in the wall behind her head. Tavish moved with supernatural speed, shoving her toward the back of the room as a second bolt punched through the wooden door. His blade was already drawn, gleaming with a faint silver sheen that marked it as forged for killing wolves. "Stay down," he commanded. But staying down was not an option. Through the shattered window, Sarilith watched dark shapes converge on her home. 5 wolves, massive and battle-scarred, their eyes gleaming with predatory focus. And behind them, 3 more figures in Morenth colors, each armed with crossbows loaded with bolts that dripped with something viscous and dark. Poison. They were not here to capture her. They were here to end her. The front door splintered inward as the first wolf crashed through. Tavish met it mid-leap, his blade singing through the air. The wolf yelped as Silver bit into its shoulder, but 2 more were already surging past their wounded companion. "Run!" Tavish roared, even as jaws closed around his sword arm. Sarilith scrambled toward the back door, her hands shaking so violently she could barely work the latch. Behind her, she heard the sickening sounds of combat, snarls, the clash of steel, a cry of pain that she prayed did not belong to Tavish. She burst into the moonlit yard and immediately collided with a wall of fur and muscle. The wolf that had circled around was enormous, its coat black as tar, its amber eyes burning with cold intelligence. It did not attack immediately. Instead, it herded her backward, step by step, until her spine pressed against the rough bark of the ancient willow that shaded her cottage, trapped. Through the open door, Sarilith could see Tavish on his knees, blood streaming from a wound on his temple. 2 wolves pinned him down while a third stalked toward Sarilith with deliberate menace. "The Morenth send their regards," a female voice called out. The crossbow wielder stepped into view, her face hidden behind a mask carved to resemble a snarling wolf. She raised her weapon, the poisoned bolt aimed directly at Sarilith's heart. "House Morenth does not forgive those who interfere with their plans, and you, little seamstress, have interfered quite spectacularly." Sarilith's hand flew to her belly, where her child kicked frantically against her palm. No, she would not die like this. She would not let her baby die before drawing its first breath. The mark on her collarbone erupted with heat so intense she thought her skin might split open. But this time, instead of pain, she felt something else surge through her veins. Power. It had always been there, buried so deep she had almost forgotten it existed. Her mother had warned her never to reveal it, never to let anyone see what she could truly do. The ability to read emotions was acceptable, common even among those with diluted wolf blood. But what lay beneath that surface gift was something far more dangerous, something that could destroy. The masked woman's finger tightened on the trigger, and Sarilith screamed. The sound that tore from her throat was not entirely human. It carried frequencies that vibrated in the bones that resonated with something primal and ancient. The wolves surrounding her cottage howled in sudden agony, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos as they scrambled away from the epicenter of the sound. But the scream was only the beginning. Aureate light erupted from Sarilith's skin, pouring from her mark in waves that crashed against the assassins like physical force. The masked woman was thrown backward, her crossbow discharging harmlessly into the sky. The wolves that had pinned Tavish fled yelping into the darkness. Sarilith stood at the center of the maelstrom, her eyes blazing with amber fire, her hair whipping around her face as power she had never fully unleashed coursed through every fiber of her being. This was her mother's legacy, the gift of the Soul Singers, an ancient bloodline that had been hunted to near extinction generations ago. The ability to weaponize emotion itself, to turn feeling into force, to shatter minds with the pure intensity of what she carried inside her. The grief of 7 weeks of exile. And the terror of being hunted, the fierce, desperate love for the child growing in her womb, all of it became a weapon. The masked woman struggled to her feet, reaching for a blade at her belt. Sarilith turned toward her, and the assassin froze as waves of paralyzing fear crashed into her mind. "You will not touch my child," Sarilith said, and her voice echoed with harmonic power. "You will not—" Her vision blurred. The light flickered. Too much. She had expended too much too quickly. power she had never learned to control draining from her like water through a cracked vessel. Her knees buckled, the glow dying around her as exhaustion crashed down with crushing weight. The masked woman recovered instantly, her blade flashing toward Serelith's throat. And then the forest exploded. Trees older than the kingdom itself shattered like kindling as something massive tore through the undergrowth. The ground shook with the force of its approach, a tremor that Serelith felt in her very bones. The assassin spun toward the sound, her blade raised. She never saw the killing blow. A wolf the size of a destrier burst from the tree line, its coat black as midnight, its eyes blazing with fury that made Serelith's display seem like a candle before a bonfire. It crossed the distance in a single, impossible leap, jaws closing around the assassin's torso with devastating finality. The woman did not even have time to scream. The massive wolf flung the broken body aside and turned in a slow circle, searching for more threats. Finding none still standing, it swung its enormous head toward Serelith. Their eyes met. The bond between them roared to life with such intensity that Serelith gasped, her hand flying to her mark as sensation overwhelmed her. She could feel him now, truly feel him for the first time. His rage, vast and terrible, his fear sharp as broken glass. And beneath it all, a longing so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The wolf approached her slowly, each step deliberate and careful, as if she were something precious that might shatter at a careless touch. When he stood before her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his massive body, he lowered his great head and pressed his nose gently to her swollen belly. The child kicked, both sides at once, as if two tiny bodies were responding to their father's presence. A sound escaped the wolf's throat. Not a growl or a snarl, but something almost like a sob. "Kadrin," Serelith whispered. The shift happened between one heartbeat and the next. Where a wolf had stood, a man now knelt in the blood-soaked grass, his hands hovering over her stomach, as if he was afraid his touch might hurt her. He looked up at her with eyes that glistened in the moonlight, and the Alpha King wept. Serelith had imagined this moment countless times during her weeks of flight. She had imagined fury, cold accusations, demands for explanations she did not have. She had prepared herself to face the wrath of a king who had been defied and humiliated before his entire court. She had never imagined him kneeling in the dirt before her, tears streaming down his face, his entire body trembling with barely contained emotion. "You are alive," Kadrin breathed. His voice was raw, shattered, as if he had been screaming for weeks. "You are alive, and you are—" His eyes dropped to her belly. His hand reached toward the swell of their child, then stopped, hovering inches away. "May I?" he asked. The question broke something inside her. The Alpha King, ruler of Volanthos, conqueror of the Eastern Territories, was asking permission to touch his own child. Serelith took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The baby kicked immediately, movement coming from two distinct places. Kadrin's eyes widened, his palm flattening against her belly to feel more. "Two," he whispered. "There are two of them." "I suspected." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "The midwife mentioned my size was unusual for how far along I am." Kadrin made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Twins. Serelith, why did you run before I could explain?" The question shattered the fragile peace between them. Serelith pulled back, breaking the contact. The warmth of the moment dissolved into cold reality. "Explain?" She heard the edge in her own voice. "When would you have done that, Your Majesty? Before or after you let me believe for 3 weeks that your brother was the one who kissed me?" Kadrin flinched as if struck. "I did not let you believe anything. I was drugged. I lost hours of memory. By the time I understood what had happened." "You were the king." The words tore from her throat. "You had resources, power. You could have found me in those 3 weeks. Instead, I heard nothing. I was left to believe that a prince loved me while you never acknowledged my existence. I was trying to protect you." Kadrin rose to his feet. Do you have any idea what would have happened if I had publicly claimed a commoner? The noble houses would have torn you apart. I needed time to secure alliances. So instead, you prepared nothing, and I fled, believing myself abandoned. I came for you. The roar shook the clearing. The moment the Ascension Gala revealed what Ivaran had done, I went to find you. Your chamber was empty. You had vanished without a trace, and I had no idea if you were alive or dead. His voice cracked. Do you know what that did to me? The bond was screaming in my chest. My wolf was tearing at my mind. I have not slept more than an hour at a time since you disappeared. I have destroyed alliances my father spent decades building because nothing matters more than finding the mate who vanished before I could tell her the truth. Serelith's anger faltered. Through the bond, she could feel echoes of what he described. The sleepless nights, the way his wolf had howled inside him, the slow erosion of his sanity as days became weeks, and hope began to die. I thought you had chosen to reject me, she whispered. I stood in the shadows and watched you let Ivaran speak. I thought you were going to let him claim the bond publicly, that you had decided a seamstress's daughter was not worth the trouble. I stepped forward to stop him. Kadrin's voice was hoarse. Some part of me knew that if he completed that claim, I would lose you forever. He moved toward her, and this time Serelith did not retreat. You are my mate, he said fiercely. The bond recognized you the moment I saw you 3 years ago, though I fought against it. I watched you from afar. I convinced myself that wanting you was a weakness. His hand rose to cup her face. And then the moonfire rite came, and I could not stay away any longer. Serelith's eyes stung with tears. The kiss, she managed, in the grove. That was really you? That was really me. His thumb traced her cheekbone. The most terrifying and perfect moment of my life. I felt the mark form on your skin as my own appeared over my heart. And then Ivaran's poison stole the hours that followed. Where is he now? Kadrin's expression hardened. In the deepest dungeon Thornspire possesses, he will answer for his crimes. A groan from nearby drew their attention. Tavish was struggling to his feet, his wounds still bleeding. My king, the first shield said through gritted teeth, we must move. The assassins we killed tonight were only the first wave. Kadrin's arm wrapped around Serelith's waist, pulling her close. Then we travel through the Thornwood, the old paths that only the king's wolves know. Before they could move, a rider burst from the darkness, pushing a lathered horse to its limits, one of the royal messenger corps. My king, the messenger gasped. Urgent news from the capital. Kadrin released Serelith with obvious reluctance. Speak. House Marenth has seized Thornspire Castle with help from traitors within the guard. Lady Selvira Marenth has declared Prince Ivarn the rightful king. The messenger's voice shook. They have taken 43 hostages. Everyone who remained loyal to you. They will be executed at dawn, unless you surrender yourself. The blood drained from Serelith's face. Who are the hostages? She demanded. The messenger looked confused at being questioned by a peasant woman, but Kadrin's nod encouraged him. Servants, mostly. Guards who refused to bend the knee. He swallowed. Including the old seamstress who worked in the royal quarters. The one they say helped a certain young woman disappear. Serelith's heart stopped. Maven, her mother's oldest friend. The woman who had taken Serelith in when she had nothing, who had taught her to sew, who had covered for her absences when Ivaran's notes called her away. Maven was going to die because of her. They rode through the night without stopping. Kadrin had shifted into his massive wolf form, and despite Serelith's protests, had insisted she ride upon his back. The other wolves flanked them in a protective formation, their eyes constantly scanning the darkness for threats. Through the bond, she could feel Kadrin's fury building with every mile. His wolf wanted blood, wanted to tear through the walls of Thornspire and destroy everyone who had dared threaten what was his. But fury was tempered by fear. 43 lives hung in the balance, 43 innocent people who would die at dawn if they did not find another way. They emerged from the Thornwood as the first gray light of dawn touched the horizon. Before them, Thornspire Castle rose against the brightening sky, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens like clawed fingers. Merenth banners flew from every tower. Kadrin shifted back to human form, catching Serelith as she slid from his back. His face was carved from granite as he surveyed his stolen home. "How many warriors do you have?" Serelith asked quietly. "Here. 30 wolves. More are coming, but they will not arrive before dawn." "And Merenth?" "At least 200. Tavish limped forward to stand beside them. "We are outnumbered more than 6 to 1. "Then we do not fight directly." Serelith's mind raced. There must be another way in. Secret passages. There are. Kadrin's jaw tightened. But Merenth will have found them. Ivarin knew every secret of that castle. Not every secret. All eyes turned to Serelith. "The servants' passages," she continued. "The routes we use to move through the castle without being noticed. Ivarin may have known the royal secrets, but he never paid attention to the common folk." Hope flickered in Kadrin's eyes. "Can you guide us through?" "I lived in those passages for 3 years. I know them better than anyone." Serelith paused. "But you cannot come with me?" "Absolutely not. Listen to me." She grabbed his arm. "If you are seen inside the castle, Merenth will execute the hostages immediately. They want you. You are the prize. But me?" She smiled grimly. "I am just a seamstress. No one important at all. You are the mother of my children. You are exactly why I need to do this." She pressed her palm over her belly. "Our children will need their father. Volanthos needs its true king. If something goes wrong, you have to survive. You have to protect them. I cannot lose you again. You will not lose me." Serelith rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, but intense. A promise and a plea wrapped together. "Trust me." For a long moment, Kadrin was silent. Then he pulled a blade from his belt. The metal gleamed with silver edges, the hilt wrapped in worn leather. "My mother's knife," he said quietly. "It has protected every member of our bloodline since the first king. Now it will protect you." Serelith's fingers closed around the hilt. "I will be waiting at the eastern gate," Kadrin continued. "The moment the hostages are free, we attack. But if anything goes wrong, you run. Let me handle the rest." "And if running is not possible?" His eyes blazed with amber fire. "Then I will tear that castle down stone by stone to reach you." The servants' entrance was exactly where Serelith remembered it, hidden behind a crumbling section of the outer wall, obscured by decades of overgrown ivy. And the narrow passage had been forgotten by everyone except the washerwomen who used it to carry linens to the river. Serelith squeezed through the gap, her swollen belly making the tight space challenging. The passage opened into darkness. She had no torch, no light of any kind, but she did not need one. Her feet remembered every step of this route, every turn and low-hanging beam. The castle above her was silent except for distant sounds of celebration. Merenth soldiers, drunk on their apparent victory. They had no idea what was coming. Serelith climbed through the darkness until she reached the junction that would lead to the dungeons. A torch flickered ahead. She pressed herself into a shadowed alcove, holding her breath as footsteps approached. 2 guards. "Waste of time. Just kill them now. Lady Selvyra wants the spectacle. Give on a public execution to prove the old king's supporters have been crushed." The guards passed without noticing her. The dungeons of Thornspire were cold and damp, the stone walls weeping moisture. Serelith emerged from a hidden panel, finding herself in a corridor lined with iron-barred cells. And there, huddled together in the largest cell, were the hostages. Maven was among them, her gray hair tangled, her face bruised but defiant. When she saw Serelith step from the shadows, her eyes went wide. "Child," she breathed, "they will kill you. They will have to catch me first." Serelith examined the lock. Old ironwork, rusted but solid. "Is everyone here?" 42. Maven's voice trembled. "They took young Corvin an hour ago." He spat in Lady Selvyra's face. Serelith's blood chilled. Where? The Great Hall. She means to make an example of him. The Great Hall, where Selvyra waited with her soldiers. Serelith's hand moved to the knife at her belt. She could free the hostages now, could lead them to safety and let Kadrin handle the rest. But Corvin would die. A boy of 16 who had served in the kitchens, who had once snuck her extra bread when she forgot to eat. She could not leave him. There is a passage behind the third cell on the left, Serelith said quickly, pressing Kadrin's knife into Maven's weathered hands. It leads to the eastern wall. The king's wolves are waiting. Get everyone out. Tell them I have gone to the Great Hall. Serelith, no. But she was already running. She emerged behind the massive tapestry that depicted the first Alpha King's victory, peering through a gap in the ancient fabric. The Great Hall was filled with Merenth soldiers, and at the center, kneeling with his hands bound, was Corvin. Lady Selvyra Merenth stood over him, a curved blade in her hand, her beautiful face twisted with cruel satisfaction. She wore a stolen crown that looked obscene against her pale hair. Let this be a lesson, Selvyra announced. This is what happens to those who defy the true rulers of Volanthos. She raised the blade. Serelith stepped from behind the tapestry. Stop. Every head turned toward the pregnant woman who had appeared from nowhere. Selvyra's eyes widened. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. Well, she purred. It seems the missing mate has finally come home. The soldiers moved to surround her, and Serelith felt the mark on her collarbone begin to burn. The soldiers formed a ring of steel around Serelith, in their blades drawn and ready. She did not move, did not flinch. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling her children stir as if sensing the danger pressing close. Release the boy, Serelith said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. He is nothing to you. Selvyra laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. And why would I do that? Because I am offering you something far more valuable, me, the king's true mate, the mother of his heirs. Take me as your hostage instead, and release everyone else. A murmur rippled through the assembled soldiers. Selvyra's eyes narrowed with calculation. You would trade yourself for a kitchen boy? I would trade myself for innocent lives. Selvyra descended from the stolen throne. She circled Serelith like a predator examining wounded prey. I expected something more impressive, Selvyra mused. The way Kadrin tore apart the kingdom searching for you, I imagined a great beauty. Instead, I find a pregnant commoner with dirt beneath her fingernails. Appearances can be deceiving. Can they? Selvyra's smile turned cruel. Here is reason. With you dead, your children die with you. The king loses his heirs and his mate in a single stroke. His wolf will consume him within days. She raised her curved blade. And then my brother Ivaran will take the throne with me as his queen. Ivaran will never be king. He is a traitor and a coward. The blade flashed. Serelith twisted away, but not fast enough. The edge caught her arm, slicing through fabric and flesh. She gasped as pain lanced through her. That was for insulting my brother. Selvyra raised the blade again. This is for ruining our plans. Through the bond, Serelith felt Kadrin's sudden surge of fury. He had felt her pain. And now he was coming. Strategy abandoned, his wolf demanding blood. But he was too far away. The blade descended toward her throat, and Serelith stopped fighting what she was. Every emotion she had suppressed for 7 weeks came flooding out. The grief, the terror, the fierce love for the children growing inside her. And beneath it all, the rage. Rage at being manipulated. Rage at being used as a pawn. Rage at the woman standing before her, who would murder innocent people for the crime of loyalty. The power exploded from her in a wave of light. This was not the unfocused blast she had unleashed at her cottage. This was targeted, precise. Every ounce of her fury channeled directly into Selvyra Merenth's mind. The lady screamed. Her blade clattered to the floor as she clutched her head, collapsing to her knees. The soldiers stumbled backward, caught in the edges of the emotional maelstrom. You feel it now, Sarilith said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in the bones. Every moment of pain you have caused, every life you have destroyed, every innocent person who suffered because of your ambition. Selvira writhed on the stone floor. Stop, please. You cannot bear it? This is only a fraction of what you have inflicted on others. The mark on her collarbone blazed like a star. And suddenly, she was not alone. The bond between her and Kadrin had been incomplete, a thread stretched thin by distance and denial. But now, with her power fully unleashed, that thread became a river. His strength poured into her, wild and vast and utterly devoted. Through his eyes, she saw herself standing in the great hall, wreathed in fire, magnificent and terrible. And she felt him coming. The great doors exploded inward. Kadrin burst through in his massive wolf form, followed by every loyal wolf who had waited at the eastern gate. The moment he had felt her blood spill through the bond, nothing could have held him back. The Morenth soldiers scattered before the onslaught. Within minutes, it was over. Kadrin shifted back to human form and crossed the hall in 3 strides, pulling Sarilith into his arms. Your arm, he breathed. She hurt you. A scratch. Sarilith leaned into him, suddenly exhausted. The hostages? Safe. All of them. He pressed his lips to her forehead. Your friend Maven led them out. She threatened to gut anyone who tried to stop them. She insisted I return this to you. He pressed something into her palm. The knife. His mother's knife, somehow finding its way back to her. At their feet, Selvira Morenth stirred weakly. What should be done with her? Tavish asked. Kadrin looked down at the woman who had orchestrated so much suffering. She will face judgment before the assembled packs. Her crimes will be read aloud, and then she will answer for every one of them. Selvira began to weep. Sarilith turned away. She had no pity left for this woman. It is done, she whispered. It is finally done. Kadrin's arms tightened around her. Not yet. There is one thing more. She looked up at him, confused. The bond, he said softly. It is still incomplete. Will you complete it with me? Here? Before all these witnesses? Sarilith's breath caught. Completing the bond meant opening herself to him entirely. No more walls. He would know every thought, every fear, every moment of weakness, and she would know his. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. The great hall fell silent as the Alpha King bared his throat to his mate. Among wolf kind, no gesture carried greater significance. A king who bared his throat was offering absolute vulnerability. He was declaring before all witnesses that this woman held power over his very life. Sarilith raised trembling hands to the collar of Kadrin's shirt, pulling the fabric aside to reveal the pulse beating strong and steady. Are you certain? She asked quietly. I have never been more certain of anything. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to the hollow of his throat. Then, guided by instinct older than memory, she let her teeth sink into his flesh, the bond completed with the force of a thunderclap. Sarilith gasped as Kadrin's essence poured into her and hers into him. They were no longer 2 separate beings but one soul in 2 bodies. She saw the moonfire right through his eyes. 3 years of watching her from afar. The kiss that sealed what both had always known. The horror of waking with hours missing, the growing dread as he pieced together what Ivaran had done. She saw him run to her chamber only to find it empty. Saw 7 weeks of anguish, sleepless nights, the constant ache of the incomplete bond that would not let him forget her for a single moment. She was weeping when she finally pulled back. And through the bond, she felt Kadrin experiencing her memories in turn. And the crushing despair of watching him choose another, the lonely journey east, the discovery of her pregnancy, the terror and wonder of knowing she carried his children while believing he had abandoned her. Kadrin made a sound of pure anguish. I am sorry, he breathed against her hair. I am so sorry you endured that alone. You did not know. She silenced him with a kiss. When they finally separated, the great hall erupted into howls of celebration. Wolves in human and animal form lifted their voices, honoring the completed bond between their king and his true queen. Tavish stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "My queen," he said, and the title no longer made her flinch. "Volanthos welcomes you." One by one, the other wolves followed suit. And through it all, Kadrin held her close. "I love you," he murmured against her ear. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you, and I will love you until the stars themselves grow cold." Sarilith lifted her hand to trace the claiming mark she had left on his throat. "I love you too," she whispered. "Even when I believed you had betrayed me." The bond knew better. Justice came swiftly. Lord Morenth was executed for treason. His daughter Silvira was stripped of her name and her wolf, exiled to the frozen wastes of the northern territories. And Ivaran. The prince was brought before the assembled Pax in chains, forced to hear the full accounting of his crimes. Kadrin offered him a choice: death or eternal exile beyond the borders of Volanthos. Ivaran chose exile. As he was led away, he turned to look at Sarilith one final time. There was no remorse in his eyes, only bitter hatred. "This is not over," he said quietly. You have won nothing." Sarilith met his gaze without flinching. "I have won everything that matters." Spring had fully bloomed by the time the royal heirs made their entrance into the world. Sarilith labored for 12 hours, Kadrin at her side through every moment. He held her hand until she thought she might crush his fingers. He wiped the sweat from her brow and whispered encouragements. And when it was over, when the midwife placed 2 squalling infants in their parents' arms, the Alpha King wept. "A son," the midwife announced, "and a daughter. Both strong, both healthy." The boy had his father's dark hair and his mother's gift, his tiny fingers glowing with faint light as he grasped at the air. The girl had silver-white eyes that would mark her as a powerful wolf. "They are perfect," Kadrin breathed. Sarilith leaned against him, exhausted but deliriously happy. "They will need names." "Thalen," Kadrin said, looking at his son, "after the first king, a name of strength and legacy." "And Mireth," Sarilith added, cradling her daughter. "After my mother, a name of song and starlight." "Thalen and Mireth." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Perfect names for perfect children." Outside, the wolves of Volanthos lifted their voices in welcome, and in the great tapestry that hung in the throne room, a new scene was already being woven. The story of a seamstress who became a queen, of a king who tore his realm apart to find his true mate, of a kiss in a moonlit grove that set destiny in motion. They had found each other against impossible odds. They had survived deception and exile and assassination. They had built something stronger than politics or power or the schemes of lesser wolves, and they would never, ever be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this story.